Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here in the South. I'm from Wisconsin, so this time of year it's a wee bit colder. And I'm up here to share with you guys about our experiences with Adrian in the back there. We spent the last 4 months touring through Europe, and we were meeting with various brothers and sisters in Germany, and then we took a little side trip to visit where Adrian's family is from. His father grew up in the Netherlands, so we got to see that, see the very house that his father grew up in, and that was during, he grew up where he was born around World War II? Yeah. Okay, so we got to learn a little bit about just the hardships that the people there had to deal with and the underground effort that was going on, because were they occupied by the Nazis?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And so that was a great experience. Culture's very, very different in Belgium. It's flat. They love their cheese, which is similar to Wisconsin. That people love cheese there too. But they have roundabouts everywhere, and they have bicycles. I think they have the most bicyclers, maybe bar none, anywhere in the world. And we had a little trip into a larger city there, Groningen. I don't know how you get to do it. Like, you really have to get in the back of your throat, Groningen. And there we just Adrian is like, yeah, let's go check out downtown. And I'm driving in Europe, and I'm used to it because we drive on the right side of the road, so that part was good. But all the roads are narrower, and there's a lot more people, and everybody's on a bike there, and bikes have right of way. So we're like weaving and dodging around, and I don't know some of the intersections and who's supposed to have right of way, and then there's a trolley, and it was just like, it was chaos. And we had to try to go down this narrow side street, and bikes are coming every which way, and then it's even worse when you're on foot, because again, the bikes you just got to watch out. So that was a good experience. But yeah, we spent most of our time in Germany, and we did a Bible training that Adrian did. We were there. We did a Bible training for about a month, where we looked at the history. Really, we laid the foundation of Adventism, and so it was a great course. It was intense. We had 3, 4, maybe even sometimes 5 messages a day, and during that time, we really had some miracles happen. We studied with a family. There's the father of this family. He was disfellowshipped from the Seventh-day Adventist Church for believing in the Father and Son. And so for, probably 15 years? Yeah, at least 15 years. That was 15 years ago that happened. And so he had been just leading his family. He's got 3 daughters and a couple sons. And so he had been leading them in their home church. And so when we came along, Brother Adrian had met him last year for the first time. And in this time, he was a little bit apprehensive about the question of the feasts. And so when we met with him, the first thing he wanted to do was like, we need to talk about the feasts. Just let's put all the pleasantries aside and all this thing. And the German culture is interesting. They're very to the point, very precise, and they want to just make sure that things are hammered out. So what seems like maybe is a bit aggressive is really just, they're doing it out of love, but they're not afraid to back down from and get right to the matter. So that's what happened. So we had a couple of awkward Sabbaths in the beginning where he just wanted us to, basically he put Brother Adrian on the spot and just said, convince me why we should keep the feasts. And so he's like, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. This is my personal belief. This is what I see in the Bible, and and this is religious liberty. And so he didn't necessarily like that, but he didn't completely close his mind. And so anyway, so fast forward, we're at the Bible training, going through the foundation of Adventism, going through just all the different messages. And as we're going through this, as we're getting to the end, the pinnacle of this of the training, we're talking about the question of the covenants, which is a huge deal. That's something that our pioneers unfortunately rejected. The vast majority of the Adventist brethren did not accept the message of Jones and Wagner which Ellen White endorsed. And so Adrian's sharing these things, and he's convicted that I need to preach this message tonight straight to Georg, straight to him, and not straight to him like, hardline, but just this message is specifically, I feel impressed it's tailored for him. And it was on the covenants, and I watched a miracle, an absolute miracle. I mean, from when we started that message, by the time it ended, that there was a complete 180-degree change. Yeah, on his countenance and everything. And he said, what were his exact words to you? Like, you've really got me sweating now. Because he thought, and he admitted, and then it was amazing. He became transparent. He said, I thought I knew. I thought I knew everything, and I realized within one sermon I know nothing as I ought. And so his whole demeanor changed. He became open to wanting to know more about the covenants and about the idea that it's a heart condition, and that these heart conditions have paralleled each other. The old covenant and the new covenant have run from Eden as soon as man fell, all the way until Christ returns again. And so that if we understand that it's how we're worshiping God is from the heart. So am I doing this? Am I coming on Sabbath, for instance, today? Am I doing this out of an obligation and a duty, a responsibility that if I do this, I'll please our Father in heaven? Or am I doing this out of faith? Do I believe that His Spirit is here in greater measure on this day, and we're receiving a blessing? Ellen White says we receive a blessing if we have a completely devotional frame of mind. We receive strength, we receive health, and we receive light. And that's pretty remarkable. And so we saw this blessing through this time amplified in Georg, because here's the interesting part. This wasn't just any day that this message that Adrian preached to him. This was on a new moon. And so to see the Spirit moving like this, and there's a beautiful part in Numbers 28 where we can actually see God's Spirit, and we can see it amplified throughout the morning and evening sacrifice, and then we come to the Sabbath, there's a double portion, and then as we just keep going further out, the new moon, 4 times the Spirit. So we witnessed that. That's something that you can't argue with, that experience, that everything changed on that night. And from that point forward, the man, this was incredible. So he has a blended family. His wife came from a former marriage, and I think he himself. And so this blended family, and his daughters, they have grandchildren, and he, especially his one daughter, he loves her grandson just dearly. And not that he didn't love his other daughter's grandson, but he publicly apologized. He brought his 8-year-old grandson. This is in front of all of us, and he brought him up to him, and he sat him down on his knee. And again, this is just a couple days after this amazing revelation, this blessing from God. He sits him down on his knee, and he says, Eddie, he says, I have to apologize. I have not loved you. I have not given you the love that you need. I have not just treated you as I have my other grandson. And he asked for forgiveness from his 8-year-old grandson in front of all of us. Everybody's just crying. It was just amazing experience. So it's just, and so from that point on, from all of our time, and then we just recently got together with him and many others in Germany for the Feast of Tabernacles. And so just to see that Spirit working in him, just continuing, he went from being just adamantly opposed to this message, and then even the character of God and all these things, to becoming one of the greatest supporters. And so, yeah, it's just testament to this message. It changes people's lives. That's what the gospel should do, right? So that was one of my favorite parts there in Germany. We also went to France next. Yeah, and we saw Adrian's good friends, Brother Mark and his wife Elizabeth, and their 2 boys. And I love where they live. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it's in the heart of if any of you guys have studied the history of the Christian church, you've got the Albigenses, and they were preservers of the primitive gospel, and they took the Bible and that, along with the Waldensians. Some say, like Ben Wilkinson, if anyone knows Truth Triumphant, he says that they're one and the same. They're just known by different names in the regions, but they were united on that primitive gospel faith. And anyway, so we're in the heart of that area, and it's very mountainous, and their home is like halfway down the side of a mountain, and it's a valley, and there's one river in this valley and another river here that are below them, and you can hear it just kind of roaring down below, and there's a waterfall you can hike to. Just a blessing, that they're there. And his family has suffered immensely, too. They've been ridiculed, first in the church for believing Father and Son, and then when it came to the message of the feast, once they accepted that, their whole independent ministry and all the group that they were fellowshipping with, virtually all of them just said no. They just kicked him out. And so they're restarting from scratch, and God has just blessed tremendously. And so we had a series of meetings there. I'm sure Brother Adrian will share more on that. Then we went to, this is a humongous surprise. I had no idea. We got to go see the Waldensian valleys. And so we went to northern Italy next with Mark and his wife Elizabeth and their 2 boys. And that trip, we were only there for 3 nights and 3 days, but there's, you guys know Wildwood, the health ministry here in America? I had no idea you could even do this. I figured that where the Waldensian sites were, the last remaining 7 valleys, I would have thought that they would have had some sort of special, they would be a special historical site that the Italian government would preserve. Well, that's not the case at all. It's pretty much, it's all private property. And so they were able, the owners of Wildwood here in America were able to buy a piece of land in the heart of Angronia, and that was the valley where the College of the Barbs was, where all the pastors would come every year for their annual synod, and they would train each other. And so they had a property within walking distance of the College of the Barbs. And they had a French sister, Daniela. She actually is managing the property there for them on their behalf. And so we got to stay there, which I had no idea. And we got there in the dark. I wish we had some good pictures. I have them on my computer, but anyways. Oh, he's got them. Okay, good. And so we got there in the dark. We woke up in the morning, and the valley. It's very narrow, and there's a raging river that flows through there, and so you can hear this river at night, but you can't see anything. So we wake up, and it's just this fortress, these mountain peaks that just go straight up, and it's all just beautiful. It's covered in just beautiful trees, and I could see why, and you could feel that this is why God used this as a sanctuary for the truth. That this is a bastion of truth. You had literally physical protection from the mountains. These people chose to dwell away from the cities and much of the corruption, and to live simple lives close to the land. And that really appeals to me too. I'll share a little bit about that. But yeah, so we got to see the College of the Barbs. We got to see, there were probably many caves there that they worshipped in secret once they began to be persecuted, but we got to go to one in particular in that valley, and it was cool. I don't know do you have any pictures of the cave? Oh, he does. Great. Adrian preached a little sermon in there, and it could probably fit maybe 100 people in this cave, and that's something that we were literally walking on the very place where these people, our spiritual forefathers and foremothers, preached the truth, at the cost of their lives. As we know, many of them were slaughtered and killed. But I think Adrian will share a really interesting observation as to why some of the persecutions happened. They gave up some of the sacred truths of the Bible, and that's when things started to change. So I'm sure he'll go into that a little bit more. But what I liked from their agrarian roots is that because they lived in such steep terrain, they had to be a little bit different with how they farmed, and because that's, for all intents and purposes, conventional agriculture doesn't work when you're on the side of a hill like this, right? So they had to terrace everything, and you couldn't see it today. The valley is much less populated than it was then, which is amazing. The only reason I knew this is because when you would take walks on the mountain trails, once you got underneath the trees, you saw all the evidence. It's all there. All the mountainsides, as high up as the tree lines go, they're all terraced. And so these trees had just grown up, and now it had become forest. There are a few remnants of pasture of modern-day farmers up there, but most of it is now forested over, and so you could see all these terraces, and then you could see the remnants of their stone dwellings. And that's what they use. They use the local material. So you had these homes made of the stone there, and it looked like it was just basically the mortar was like a clay base, which is really cool. And then the roofs of these houses, it was thick stone roofs. So the structural framework, and they used chestnut wood for their rafters and for the trusses and how they built it, but for it to support the weight of, I mean, this isn't like slate roofs. I mean, the stone, the thickness of it is like a couple inches thick. And so you can only imagine how much weight is on top of this roof. But some of these homes have been standing for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so I got to see all that when I was exploring. And one of the things that has, I think, been integral to their ability to live close to the land is that, I mean, the Waldensian church goes all the way back to maybe about the 4th century, were some of the forefathers of that movement. And then it really started to gain its height maybe beginning 8th, 9th century on into the 14th, 15th century. And so before about, I think it would be the 1600s, crops that we just think as that they've always been there, such as corn and potatoes, those didn't exist in Europe. Potatoes came from South America. They came from Peru. And corn, obviously, that's from Central America. And so what did they eat? What were their staple food crops? Well, they had grains, right? That was one we know for sure. But there's the other little. It used to be that was how much of that southern part of Europe survived. But today we know very little of this culture. The other crop, maybe I'll ask you. It's a perennial crop. It's a staple crop, so it means it's a huge carbohydrate source, but it's perennial. Do you guys have any idea what this was? So this was what they really subsisted on with the grains until corn and potatoes came. Nope. It's a tree. Chestnuts. Yeah. And chestnuts are a remarkable creation of Christ. And that tree is probably one of the most useful trees in the world. And it's two reasons. One, the chestnut itself. It's for a nut. It's very unique. It's not high in fats. It's actually very high in carbohydrates. It's got a little bit of protein, just a little bit of fat. But what that allows it to do is you can use this just as you would use any other carbohydrate source. So whether it's rices in Asia and in that area, or whether it's the corn and potatoes that eventually came to Europe, you could use it. You could eat them raw. You could grind them after you dry them. You could grind them into flour, chestnut breads and things. You could put them in soups. You could use them however you want. And it had, I saw one study or one article that suggests it's a complete protein. So if it's not a complete protein, it sounds pretty close. And so you're able to get a lot of nutrition in this. And it's something that it grows every single year. You don't have to till your soil. You don't have to, add any fertilizer or nutrients. And so some tree crops, right, they don't always produce a lot every year. They'll have one year where it's a whole bunch, right? And then the next year, nothing. Well, chestnuts aren't like that. It's just every single year they consistently produce huge crops. And so the Waldenses, as well as, that region of southern Europe and then into Western Asia, it was a chestnut culture. And actually, in this country, too. Right where we are here, there used to be chestnut forests. But as we know, as we've come into the last days, and this is interesting, right about the time when Ellen White died, that's when the thing that wiped the chestnuts out in our country showed up, the chestnut blight. That came over from Asia. I think we brought over some Chinese chestnuts, which were more or less resistant, not immune, but much more resistant. So it was dormant. They brought these over, and then it showed up in New York State first in 1913. And from that point on, within about, 50 years, all the trees were wiped out. They cut a lot of them down ahead of time because they were worried. And so they had no idea to know if any of the trees would actually be immune to this disease. So our pioneers of our church, they would have grown up eating American chestnuts, which what everybody says is they're the sweetest of all the chestnuts in the world. And these trees they're the redwood of the East. I wish I had pictures. I don't know if anybody's seen the historical pictures of these forests. Some of the trees were over 12 feet in diameter. They had, the trunk. They had families of 4 people standing side by side, and they have pictures of this. Just amazing. And you had the whole Appalachian culture was a chestnut culture. And so when the chestnuts got wiped out, that really changed everything. We had many more people going into the cities, and that resilient culture, that homesteading culture started to change. And the other interesting thing about chestnuts, because I said it's one of the most useful trees in the world, the wood. The wood is phenomenal. It's high in tannin, and what that allows it to be very rot resistant. And so you could take and they would grow chestnut trees in several different ways. You could just have like an orchard, so you're just harvesting for the nuts, or you could also do like a combination where you're harvesting for the timber and the nuts as well. And chestnuts, like many hardwoods, if you cut them down, they don't actually die. They send out new shoots, and that's called coppicing. And so what people have done for thousands of years, they would manage their chestnut forests or their groves, where they would, depending on the size of the diameter of the timber you wanted, they would cut on rotations of, let's say, 2 years, 7 years, 20 years, and then depending on that diameter, that's what they would use for different applications, for homes, for fence posts, etc. And so that tree just keeps producing. Actually, I just found this out. The largest tree in the world is it's on the side of Mount Etna, which is a volcano in Italy, and it's a chestnut tree. And this thing has been, they figure it's like several thousand years old. So it's really remarkable. I love learning from God's lesson book of nature, and just to see, because they've written their wisdom. The Father and Son have written into creation just all of their infinite wisdom that shows the pattern of Father and Son, that shows their love for us and all these things. And so that they blessed us with trees like this and many others and all over the world where we can live close to the land and our needs can be provided for. It was a blessing to be able to see that. So that was a great part of the Waldensian valleys. And then that picture right there, that's from Bulgaria, right? Yeah, that was with Brother Deyan and his wife and their children. He actually was just, I'll let Adrian share about that part. But this was a hike that we took up. This is right by Sophia, and that's the capital of Bulgaria. It's like 2 million people, humongous city. And just to the south of there, it's kind of in nice. It's in a valley, and then there's 2 mountain ranges. You have the southern end of the Balkan Mountains. Yeah, there he is right there. And so that's, Deyan and obviously myself and Adrian. And we hiked up to this. We didn't know actually where we're going. We just said, we want to go up to the mountain. And Brother Deyan's like, yeah, I know where to go. And he didn't know where he was going, but it turned out to be a blessing because God, ended up taking us to a place where we talked with a local, and they said, oh yeah, you climb up the mountain, you go this way. And so we parked the car at this spot where there's a trail, and again, we didn't know where we were going, but it took us right up to what you see right there. And there's the river that was flowing the whole way, and then this really beautiful waterfall. And so you can see behind you there's a city of 2 million people. And that was just a tremendous blessing. And it was cool because at one point, Adrian was like running up the mountain like a deer. It was really cool to see that. So we had a great time there, and then we went to Serbia, and we met with some other good brother and sister, Brother Boris and Sister Carol. He's been a Bible worker for 20 years. He's believed in the Father and Son for about that long, and God really blessed him to that. He just committed himself to the Lord at that time, and so he's trying to share this truth with everybody, but very few people in Serbia really appreciate it. And so it's really been a blessing for Adrian and him to be connected, and for me to be a part of that and to be able to meet him. He's doing great work in Serbia. It's really amazing. The hardships and the adversity and the trials that he's gone through will make you cry. And maybe Adrian will share some of that. Maybe he won't. I'm not sure. But yeah, just a blessing. And so then we wound up at Tabernacles in Germany, and that's where we just came from. And that was it was great. We had maybe around 50 people. People from France. Brother Mark came up from France. We had people from Austria. We had someone from Serbia. Myself from America, Adrian from Australia, many Germans, and it was beautiful. We got to really just see this God's Spirit really working on our hearts to really have a deeper appreciation for the gospel, for Christ, what He's doing in our hearts, and especially at His appointed times. On the Sabbath, on the new moons, the feasts, and so to really be together with brothers and sisters who really want to be Bereans and study the Word, and then learn. It's all founded on the foundation of Adventism. For anybody who's I don't know where everybody is with feasts or not. That doesn't matter if you're a feast keeper or not. That's not why I'm sharing this. But there's many people who keep the feasts that are very much kind of more of a Hebrew roots kind of aspect. In this case, this was Billy on the platform of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. What did our pioneers believe? What was the midnight cry? What did Samuel Snow share with the people? How did he determine that Christ moved to the most holy place on October 22nd, 1844? What does it have to do with the feast? So all these things, it's really beautiful. And so there's plenty of materials, I think, that Brother Adrian has written about these things as well, if anybody's interested. So, yeah, that's a little bit about our experiences. It was a blessing because I had just met Adrian, in February of this year. And God had blessed me to be able to come because I had just sold a business and not for a lot of money, but it gave me freedom and time. And so we really hit it off. And Adrian took a risk. He said, "Hey, do you want to come with me to Europe?" And I said, "That sounds amazing. I'll pray about it." And within 2 days, I'm like, "Yeah, I felt impressed. God wants me to go." So, yeah, I've just been learning the gospel and just watching how God is working in all these people's lives, and to know that we have brothers and sisters all over the world, guys, that are believing and studying these same things and are hungering for the truth, and just to see how God's people are being prepared. I see in my personal experience here, I feel that the preparation is accelerating, and that people are coming to the truth, and they're learning these things very fast, and they're very hungry. And I see that here too, which has been a blessing. So thanks for your time.
You'll notice that Ben has a love of agriculture. It's kind of rubbed off on me. When we're in northern Germany, north of Berlin, they have on the sides of the roads many apple trees and pear trees and plum trees, and people can just come and pick them and take them. And Ben's going, "Oh, wow, look at this," and stuff that I would never really notice before, but I was kind of drawn into it through Ben, and that was a tremendous blessing. So I was thinking this morning that I would surname Ben Barnabas, because he's been a son of consolation as we've gone from place to place to minister to different people, and it's just been a tremendous blessing, and to work together. And really it goes back to 2006. I wasn't aware at the time that it was a Sabbath leading into a Sunday, but as I went back, I realized that in 2006 that this was actually a new moon, from the Sabbath leading into a new moon. And it was the morning I woke up, and I'd just spoken about God's love for his children through the identity message, and I was strongly impressed with the words, "This message you must take to the world." It was a very, very strong impression that came to me, and so that's what this is all about. In terms of what I'm doing, and some people say, "What are you doing going all over the world?" Well, God told me to go around the world. How do you know that? Well, I know. So that's just I know. So these pictures, as I said, this is overlooking the city of Sophia. Our brother there, Deyan, a precious, precious brother, and he had been reading some of our material from the website, and he also had been writing some material on a relational understanding of the gospel. And as we compared notes with each other, this man who lives in the area of the Bogomils, the people who worship the Father and the Son and kept the Sabbath, this gem in the land of Bulgaria. Deyan has a PhD in pedagogy. He's highly skilled. He's an incredible translator. And his wife also has a PhD, so they're incredibly educated people. They know a lot, and they have committed themselves to translating a lot of the material that we've been working on. So I was eager to go and visit him. I had no plans, I had no agenda, because he was still a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and if we had organised meetings, it would have caused him a lot of trouble, and I didn't want to cause him any trouble with the church. And so when we went there, I just said, "We'll just spend time with you, and whatever happens." Well, we ended up having a number of meetings. There was 2 young people there that the church had refused to baptize because they had come into the truth of the Father and the Son. So they contacted us and said, "Would you baptize us?" So we had a baptism in a beautiful lake. That's Brother Radi there, and That water behind, you can see there, was quite cool, but Brother Ruddy was a smart thinker. He brought me a pair of fishing waders so that I didn't feel anything. But I knew it was cold because as I was baptizing him, or just before we were about to baptize him, he said to me, "Are we going to start now?" It was pretty cold, but it was beautiful. A lovely lake there in Sophia. That's his wife. She was 8 months pregnant. I was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? We don't want to rush you to the hospital after doing the baptism." But she handled it quite well, and as she went down, she was like, as she went down. But she came up smiling and rejoicing. Just a lovely couple. And it was a tremendous joy there because we had some of the elders. 2 elders had come from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. One of them was a believer in the Father and Son. And after we conducted the water baptism, as it says in Acts chapter 19, verses 5 and 6, there is a water baptism and then there's a spirit baptism, because you lay hands upon them and pray for the gift of the Holy Spirit. And that made a lot of sense to me because that's divine pattern. That's visible, invisible. And so I invited the elders from the church to come and lay hands. I recognize the leadership of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I believe that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is God's remnant church. And like the Israel of old, who went into apostasy many times, that's what's happened today. But it's still God's church. And I believe that God has not forsaken his church, and that there will come a group of people from this place. And this is my desire. And so I invited them to come. One of the elders came and he joined us. The other elder didn't quite understand, and he didn't want to be directly involved. And he said, "Why are you not doing this baptism within the Seventh-day Adventist Church?" I said, "That's a question you should ask the Seventh-day Adventist Church," because they had refused to baptize them into the name of Jesus, according to Acts 2:38, all the passages that talk about being baptized in the name of Jesus. And I said, I would be happy for the church to baptize them into the name of Jesus, but they won't do it, so we're happy to do it. So as a consequence, on October 22nd of this year, Deyan was disfellowshipped from the Seventh-day Adventist Church for organising this baptism. So we need to pray for him, but he's not daunted, and he continues to translate and prepare materials. We are now printing several booklets and books in Bulgaria, and we'll continue to do this. We're running maranathamedia.bg, which is the Bulgarian website, and there's a lot of good things happening there. This is we just landed in France, and this is in Toulouse, where they build the Airbus. And not far from this, of course, is the city of Elbe, which is the land of the Albigenses. And so there's Elizabeth and their 2 sons, Joshua and Daniel. And it was good to see them again. Here we are this was the place where we ran our camp meeting, and the place was called Saint Rome, where we preached the gospel in a little... It's an interesting part of the southern part of France. You have Saint Rome, Saint Africa, all the saints down there. Yeah. And we were just having a meal there together. There's some of the publications. We've translated several books into French. Return of Elijah has been translated, a very big work. And so there we were at the meeting when another brother was presenting, and we had a nice gathering of people there. There we are presenting. Brother Mark is translating. And Sister Elizabeth had attended Heartland, and she was doing some hydrotherapy treatments. So it was good to be reminded of some of the water treatments that can be done. As she's there with her son, we had a bit of fun when we were doing that. Mark and Elizabeth are both very talented with music, and they were singing some songs for us there. So having a meal together. Now we're cutting back to, this is in Germany, and here we are on the banks of the Elbe, where we conducted a baptism during the time of the training program that we conducted in North Germany. And you can see the clouds were forming in the background. And we had this on a number of occasions that as the baptism was being conducted, in the background there was a storm and thunder, and we felt the presence of God as we conducted the baptism. I think we had about 4 that day. It was a very pleasant time together in the Elbe. And there's Brother Ben. He decided to be baptized, and we were very excited about that. Brother Reuben came from Australia. I've known Reuben for a long time. He's fluent in German. He spent his first 8 years in Germany, and had been one of my elders in Australia, and has come into the Father and the Son. And he was just a wonderful help in terms of the translation work. He presented the training folder that we have, God's Last Message of Love, where we go right through the Adventist message in chart form. We have it on the website. You can download it. And he was teaching in German the Third Angel's message using the folder. And the other lady there is Francisca. She's one of our translators, helping us to translate material into German. So there we are on the banks. Here we are in Serbia. This is with Brother Boris. And again, it was 2 years ago that we went to conduct meetings in Serbia. Boris had baptized, he had brought to the Seventh-day Adventist Church at least 40 people who have been baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He had been a believer in the Father and the Son. He had not agitated his position. He had not caused disruption or difficulty. He had just been faithful to the church. When they heard that we were coming, they just fellowshipped him, kicked him out of the church. So, I mean, even from a logistical point of view, I mean, there's 40 tithe payers. I mean, come on, guys, think about it. So, even if you want to think from a money point of view, no, out. So, they chucked him out. So, Boris is just an incredible brother. There we are together, Boris and I. Boris has haemophilia. He regularly has to take injections. He has damaged his knees. He can hardly walk. Bill remembers, because Bill spent time with us there in Serbia when we were there a couple of years ago. And he had an infection when he was younger, and the doctors accidentally cut some of his vocal cords. So his voice, he had a beautiful baritone voice. They destroyed his voice, so he speaks with a husky voice. And this man is relentless. We've got a nice window there on the screen. Oh no, you can't see that. Only I can see it. Good. The man in the grey, I'm in the blue in the middle, and in the grey outfit, that's Boris. And because of the haemophilia and the fact that he has to regularly take injections, many haemophiliac sufferers suffer from hepatitis C because of the injections. And Brother Boris, again, contracted hepatitis C because of this, and it's just unfortunate that happened. So there is a remedy for this. If you were to buy this remedy within the United States or Australia, it would cost you about $40,000 to do the treatment. But they have an agreement in India where they're able to sell generic versions of the same things, and he was able to get it for 1,200 euros. He was able to get the complete course, and so we were able to help him get to India. And the doctors there in Serbia are eager to help people, but it's all restricted and cut down in Serbia. You can't get the medication. All these hepatitis sufferers, there's about 300,000 of them in Serbia, and they can't get the help. And so the doctors are saying, if you can get this medication in India, we'll do it. We recommend you do it if you can do it. We can't help you, but if you can do it. And so Boris has established connections with people in India, and he is helping hundreds of people with hepatitis C. And with every packet of medication, they get a great controversy. They get a Steps to Christ. Some of them are showing interest in spiritual things. And so it has opened up a tremendous new field for Boris to reach out to people in the world. While we were there, he helped 3 or 4 people, and they were just so thankful. These people are so desperate to receive help. And through him going to India and establishing these connections, he's been able to help a lot of people. And we know will help a lot more. We talked about we're going to send some more funds for him to get more Bibles and more great controversies to be able to give to these hepatitis C sufferers. And apart from all that, Boris has suffered terribly. The people in Serbia, when they turn away from the official teaching of the church, many of them are brutal in their treatment of the church. The church is Babylon, just so aggressive. And Boris has maintained his love for the church, and because he has done this, he not only gets hit by the church, he gets hit by the anti-Trinitarians, and he's the sandwich in the middle. And he's suffered tremendously, and with his haemophilia and with his voice and with all the suffering that he goes through, this man is so precious. And I ask you to pray for him. I know that here at Talking Rock there's been support as well, and we're just very appreciative of that for the work that he's doing over there, he and his wife. And there's the two children. Next to Boris is his mother-in-law and their two children, Martin and Sarah. So, yeah, there's Carol in the middle. She's holding the book. And there's some of the other believers there. So there's just another picture after one of the meetings. We just had some impromptu meetings again. We didn't organise anything formally because Boris, I said, don't organise anything, you're exhausted. So we just had some people come and we did some meetings. Here we are. This is one of the Waldensian churches. We're in the Pradel Torno in the Angranja Valley. And when we got here, we got there at night, and so the next morning when we woke up, we were living in a cottage, or stayed in a cottage 200 feet from the College of the Barbs. That's where we stayed for 3 nights, and this was one of the Waldensian churches, looking out over the hills there. This is coming down into one of the caves where the Waldenses met. This is a little bit around from where we were in a place called Shan Faran. And here's one of the memorials to the Waldenses and their faith. There's the two boys in the cave, and just there at the entrance, looking down over another one of the churches in that particular place. Now, what's interesting about the Waldenses, and I'll just mention this briefly, is that they had begun to suffer small amounts of persecution in the 1300s, 1200s, there's a little bit, 1400s, there was some persecution that began to occur. It was in the land of the Albigenses, which is about 6 hours from here. Innocent III had proclaimed destruction of the Albigenses in the 12th century, around the 12th century. So I just want you to underscore this point. If you've had any questions about this, Leroy Froome says that Innocent III is the greatest of Roman pontiffs. I mean, you work it out. This is the man that ordered the destruction of the Albigenses. So, yeah, work it out. So, here we are in Shan Faran, and in the 15th century, in the beginning of the 1500s, when the Protestant Reformation began, the Albigenses had been suffering quite in the late 1400s. On a Christmas Eve, the Waldenses did not think that they would be attacked by the Piedmontese, but they came and they drove them out of their homes. Many of them went up onto the mountain ridge on Christmas, and men, women, children froze to death. That was in the late 1400s. And then in the 1500s, the Protestant Reformation began, and there was an agreement between the Protestants and the Waldenses that they would join together. Now, what had happened was that part of the joining together, and I've read a number of the histories now. While I was there, I read Wiley's history, and what I would say to you, after reading Wiley's history of the Reformation, of the Waldensian, I would say to you, indeed, it is a Wiley history. Yeah. There are problems with the way this has been written in reference of how he makes reference to the Trinity and reference to Sunday in that book, and presenting that as part of the Waldensian faith, which it was not part of their faith. But in Shan Faran, when they joined with the Protestants, they gave up the Sabbath and they started to move to the Trinity. but they hoped to escape persecution and protection and receive protection from the Protestants. But it got worse. And when they gave up the Sabbath, and this is what we were talking about last night in the book of Exodus chapter 5, that the Sabbath is a hedge of protection. And when you give up that hedge of protection, you get sword, you get pestilence, and you get famine. That's what happened to the Waldenses. They had a plague come through from southern France, nearly wiped out the whole valley. They had 12,000 people that were wiped out by a plague in the Waldensian valleys. This is all after 1532, when they had joined with the Protestants. And I felt deeply saddened, and it was a great lesson to me about what happens when people give up the Sabbath, they give up the statutes. Not far from here in Milan, it had been a great centre for a group of people who had kept the law of Moses without circumcision. And they had kept the statutes and the judgments. They had done all of these things. But they gave all of this up under persecution, or many of them gave it up, or those who continued to practice this were pushed aside. And so the history of the Waldenses is a lesson for us. And my brother in Bulgaria, he had come across an article by James White, which is extraordinary, because he says in that article that the woman in Revelation 12 becomes the woman in Revelation 17. It's quite bizarre. I've never heard this before. It's interesting when you look at what happened with the Waldensians. In Italy, now the Waldensian Church, the leader of the Waldenses is a very good friend of the Pope, and they have been the first church to agree to homosexual marriage. The Waldenses. And it just makes your heart sad when you see these types of things happen. But it's a lesson for us. It's a warning for us. Here we are in one of the, that's Brother Mark and Ben, and we're outside the front of one of the little schools. There was an Englishman, Mr. Beckwith, who had tried to support the Waldenses and re-establish their education. Coming from Protestantism, again, we see that this is a blessing on the one hand, but the Protestants are educating them. They're going to educate them in Sunday, the Trinity, and all the other things. So there's problems with this as well. It was nice and wet. There's just a picture. This is the way we had to dry some of our clothes because it was raining. It was good. This is where we were staying. Just a beautiful picture. I don't know if I've got a picture of the mountains. That's the temple of the Waldenses. There's their logo up the top, Lux Lucent in Teberis, a light that shines in the darkness with 7 stars around the candle, up to the College of the Barbs. This is the College of the Barbs, where the pastors would be trained. And I think if you've seen any of Jim Arabito's work, you will be familiar with this history. There's a copy of the Bible. Okay, there we are looking over the valleys. This is up above the College of the Barbs, looking into the Angronia Valley. And look down into that valley and you know that thousands of people were slaughtered in that, all over these hills, all through this place. The most horrific things that were done. But the interesting thing about the Waldenses is that when you read their history, they were fierce fighters. 15 guys could take out 600, 700, 800 men. And you see how that they were protected in many, many ways. But as we've been discovering in our previous lectures, once you take the sword, there's other problems that are associated with that. This is down in Torre Pellice, another one of the Waldensian churches. This is overlooking the Angronia River. Again, the scene of many battles that took place there. Now, I'm not even sure. Oh, this is up on the heights of the Castelluzzo. If you know the story of Castelluzzo, many of the Waldenses had run to the top of this mountain overlooking Torre Pellice, and the Piedmontese found them and they threw them off the cliff. Hundreds of them, men, women, children, just threw them off. This is...
What are those things that look like pipes? Do they have water pipes there?
I think that's a fence. Yeah, that's a fence. That's a fence.
On top of the fence.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, just a fence there. And this is up in the... as you're going down the valley, down this way, it's heading towards Bobbio, another place in the Waldensian valleys. So I think we've come to the end of those slides. You've got a few up there as well. So after we had been to Serbia, as I said, we went back to Germany, and it was just a privilege to be able to introduce the statutes and the judgments and to establish the work there in Germany. And it was a tremendous blessing. One of the blessings that we had in northern Germany, I had the opportunity to preach in a Seventh-day Adventist church. There was a lady that had been attending there for 5 years. She was a Roman Catholic. When we preached on the story of the cross, she went to the elder afterwards and she says, "I want to be baptized. And that gentleman that preached, I want him to baptize me." So we had the opportunity to baptize someone into the church in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So that was a tremendous... I didn't think it would happen, but it did happen. So I'm still working for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I'm very, very happy about that. That was one of the blessings that we were able to have there. And we took this... They decided to have the baptism at the beach, and the last time they had a baptism there, it was a bit cold and there was nobody there, so I thought there'll be nobody there, but it was quite a warm day. We went down there. We had 150 people on the beach watching us do this baptism, and they're all standing and looking and wondering why we're going out there in our clothes and dunking these people in the water. So that was a tremendous blessing. So we just are thankful to God for the work that God's given to us to do in Europe. There's still a lot of translation work. We're supporting quite a number of translators and Bible workers in that part of the country, and it's all part of fulfilling the commission that we should take this message to the world. So thank you for listening, and you've got some pictures that... They're ready to go.
I don't know what I'm doing, so... Yeah, we got one. Okay, well, let's go back. Okay, yeah, here's the roofs. Look at those things. Yeah, I mean, that's not thin stone. So we tend to think that, well, I don't know, maybe we know better, but the world would tell you that people that lived before us are ignorant, dumb, not intelligent. We're better because we have all this technology. That's just amazing to me. So there's how they support it. Look at that. I mean, that's probably chestnut you're looking at there, and how that holds up all that weight. It's really, really remarkable. Yeah, so chestnut wood is very rot resistant, and so like if you make fence posts out of it, you can stick it in the ground untreated for 50 years, and then you pull it out and you flip it over, and you get another 50 years out of it. So yeah, really cool. There you go. That's the same. That's the College of the Barbs. You can just see just the beautiful. They just worked with the materials that they had. So it was the lumber from the hills, which is primarily chestnut, and then the stone there. You know, it's really, really remarkable how they laid, and all the terracing that they did. I mean, they don't have tractors. They didn't have excavators. This is all done by hand over hundreds of years. So it's just really, really remarkable. There's just another shot of one of the hikes I did in Gronia there. You can see how these mountains just come straight up like that, and just under, on the sides of these hills, which look in some cases like, how in the world do you live on that? They had homes, and they had the terraces so that they could farm and they could raise cattle, and just all this really cool stuff. There's chestnuts. Yes. So if anybody hasn't seen, those are big ones. They're bigger. The European chestnut, it's called the sweet chestnut. The American chestnuts are sweeter. They're the sweetest, but these are big. And yeah, I would say inch and a half, maybe 2 with the big ones. So yeah, it is. It was big. Those aren't quite ripe yet, so they're a little bit bitter. You got to let them make sure they're ripe. But yeah, just an amazing food that God has given us. There's another view. That was near Castelluzzo, where the Waldensians were thrown off to their deaths. You can just see this. these remaining 7 valleys where they were all over the years herded and concentrated in, this was the last bastion for them. And so this is where today, this is pretty much where you go if you want to learn about the Waldensians, even though they were all over. I mean, they were all over northern Italy, they were all over southern France, even into southern Germany, southern Switzerland. But, you know, unless you really can dig through the history and try to find some of the stuff, most of the history of their people it's wiped out. The only thing we know primarily is basically through the records of the Roman Catholic Church. And that's how we put together some of the history. So it's a very, very sad story. This is an example of, that's a chestnut tree, a single tree with all those stems. That's what happens when you cut it. It will shoot up all these stems. And oak trees do this. Many hardwood trees do this. And this is something that people have done throughout Europe for thousands of years. We did it to some extent in America. The Indians probably did it. And so they're getting a double harvest then. So they're getting chestnuts off of that. And then whenever they want to cut that again, then they get all the timber. And then it will shoot up more sprouts. And that whole forest along the side of the mountain there, it was just solid chestnuts, all like that. There's an example of just a gnarly looking, again, there's a chestnut tree that, who knows how old that is, and it just keeps right on growing. So again, if you cut that, they'll just send up more shoots, and you get a perpetual harvest of lumber and, of course, nuts. It would take, if you cut that down, it maybe would take 2 years, 3 years tops, and you'd start to get nuts again. It's really, it's amazing. It's really amazing. There's an example again of that's one chestnut tree. And it just looks crazy. If you don't cut it, it'll be a huge, probably single trunk tree. But if you do this coppicing system, it just keeps spreading out on the same root system. So I have no idea how old that tree is. That's well over 100 years. It could be several hundred years. It could be 400 years old. I don't know. It's really beautiful. There's the chestnut in the burr. So that's what it looks like. Really, it's an awesome barrier against squirrels. I mean, it's squirrel proof. And once it ripens, you know, for those of you who know chestnuts, and then it opens up and you can pluck them out. You don't want to touch the spines; it definitely hurts. And see, so these people up front here, they know chestnuts, which is great. I didn't know chestnuts until a couple of years ago. But
Some on our farm in Pierpont, but they all died from time of plague.
the blight got them. Okay, where are you from?
Well, I was born and raised in Pierpont, Ohio.
Okay.
We had chestnut trees there. We lived and died.
Okay, what year do you remember when they started to die?
Well, I was born in 1928 and I was raised up there for at least 20 years.
Okay.
It'll be 28, 38, 48. That's 8,000.
Okay, so you said he was born in 1928 in an area in Ohio, and it was about 20, 30 years after you were born? Yeah, that's when they started to die. And so these trees covered all of pretty much the eastern United States. A third to a half of the forest was chestnut trees. And today we would have no idea. So very, very sad story. You do? Oh, you did? Okay. And so it's just a sign of the times, guys. You know, I mean, basically every single tree species now, they have diseases. You know, I mean, think of all the steps that we have to go through to protect our fruit trees. You know, in the conventional world, you're spraying them and you're doing all this stuff and it's just making it worse. But chestnut trees were wiped out. If you guys know elm trees in our country, Dutch elm disease wiped out all the elm the specific American elms, which would get huge and they would be like, it's a vase shape at the top. They would plant them in cities and it would make this archway. Very famous. All those are wiped out. I'm trying to think of what else. Beech. A lot of beech trees have been hit with disease. What's that? Hemlocks. Yeah, you've got even some of the oak trees, oak wilt, and so it's a sad state of affairs. But you know, in one respect it's sad, in the other respect it means that we're just that much closer to Christ coming, and then the new earth will be restored, and it's going to be more beautiful than we can imagine. So.
There's a tendency now of everything to get to the place where human beings would be safe on this earth. In other words, less oxygen, less of the things that we need. Just point to the fact that Jesus is coming soon.
Yeah, amen. He said he's to the point now where it's it's hard to even have to live here in a healthy manner. There's less oxygen than there was before. Ellen White talks about this too. It's darker, just on average. She talks. So yeah, these are signs that Christ is coming. You can see it in His creation. His creation groans. You know, as He suffers, when all of us, you know, the people choose to reject Him, when we sin, these things cause suffering. We know that the ground was cursed, and so Satan has been able to destroy. He hates anything that Christ has created, us and all the rest of the creation included. So if we can just, you know, go out in nature, we can see these things. But there's still a blessing. He still has called us to be able to live close to the land, and we know there's going to be a day soon when we won't be able to buy and sell. All the grocery stores where we get all of our food, they're going to be gone, and so it's just cool to. I'm reconnecting with this. You know, I spent the first 29 years of my life lived in the country, but not really appreciating this. So it's been cool these last couple of years to see how God's been leading me with this passion to learn these things, and then to be able to start to grow our own foods and teach other people who want to do this as well. So I think there's just a couple more. I think that might be. That's it.
Thank you.